Hello students, in our previous class we learned about the graphical representation of polynomials, and the polynomials were linear polynomials and quadratic polynomials. Okay, in this class we will learn the graphical representation of a cubic polynomial. So here in problem number 4 there is a cubic polynomial. So as previous, we let y equals to f of x is equals to x cube minus 4x. So then we get an equation which is y is equals to x cube minus 4x, and then factorizing this x cube minus 4x, we get y is equals to x into x plus 2 into x minus 2. Okay. So now we have to form a solution table. So to form the solution table, first of all, we have to put x equals to 0, x equals to minus 2 and x equals to 2, because for these three values of x that are 0, minus 2 and 2, we have y is 0. So that is why first of all for this solution table we choose these three values. They are x equals to 0, x equals to minus 2 and x equals to 2, and for these three values y is equals to 0. Okay, then we put x equals to minus 1, and for this x equals to minus 1 we have y equals to 3, and after putting these more values we get these different values of y. Okay, so now the solution points becomes x comma y is equals to 0 comma 0 minus 2 comma 0 2 comma 0 minus 1 comma 3 1 comma minus 3 and 3 comma 15 and minus 3 comma minus 15. Okay, so now here if we follow this xy plane, then we take different lengths for the x-axis and for the y-axis to represent unit distances. Okay, so why we choose these two different lengths for x-axis and for y-axis? Now we choose these different lengths to get a more clear view of the graphical representation of this cubic polynomial. Okay, so let us plot these points and draw the graph of this polynomial. So first point is 0 0. Minus 2 comma 0, two comma 0, minus 1 comma 3, minus 1 comma 3. One comma minus 3, three comma 15, minus 3 comma minus 15. Now if we join these points by line segments, then we get a graphical representation of this. Okay, so this graphical this graph, that means What do you mean by graph? In our previous class, we know what do you mean by graph. Graph means after plotting the solution points on this xy plane, if we join these points by line segments, then we get a continuous line. That continuous line is known as graph. Okay, so here this continuous line represents the graph of this cubic polynomial y equals to f of x equals to x cube minus 4x. If we follow this graph intersects x-axis at three different points. They are minus 2, 0, 0, 0 and 2, 0. Okay. So these 3 points represents 3 zeros of this cubic polynomial, because for these 3 points y coordinates becomes 0. Okay. So that indicates when a graph intersects x-axis, that means when a graph of a polynomial intersects x-axis, then every intersecting point will represent the solution points or zero of that polynomial. Okay. So here the graph of the polynomial f of x equals to x cube minus 4x intersects x axis at 3 different points, and for these points f of x y equals to f of x equals to 0. That is why the number of points at which the graph of a polynomial intersects x-axis will represent number of zeros of that polynomial. Okay. So this graph help us to understand how many zeros a polynomial can have. So this graph intersects x-axis at 3 different points. That is why we can, and for these 3 different points, y equals to f of x equals to 0. That is why we can say the number of points at which the graph of a polynomial intersects x-axis will represent the number of zeros of that polynomial. Okay. So these are the graphical representation of a polynomial. Now we will learn how we can find the sign of the coefficients, like sign of uh, the coefficient of x square for a quadratic polynomial, and what will be the sign of its constant term by after seeing its graphical representation. Okay. Now we will learn how we can find the sign of a, b and c for this quadratic polynomial whose graphs are given. Okay. So students, in problem 1 there is a graph. So this graph, already we know these kind of graphs are known as parabolas. So in the first problem the graph is a downward graph. That means the parabola is opened at negative y axis. Okay. So here we have to find the sign of a, b and c. In our previous classes we learned how we can find the vertex of a parabola. Okay. So by this way we can find the vertex of this second degree equation, or the equation of a parabola. Okay. So the vertex is minus b by 2a comma capital minus capital D by 4a. That is why we write here the vertex are this. That is, for individual parabolas, the vertex are represented by minus b by 2a comma minus capital D by 4a. Okay. So for this problem 1, if we want to find the sign of a, b and c, then we have to follow the following procedures. Since the parabola is opened at negative y axis, therefore a is lesser than 0, imply a is negative. Already we learned for this downward parabola, that is when the parabola is opened at negative y axis, then always coefficient of x square, that is a, is negative. Okay. Now if we follow its vertex, vertex a is minus b by 2a comma minus capital D by 4a. Okay. So here the vertex lies on first quadrant. So see, since this vertex A lies on first quadrant and A is negative, so B must be greater than 0. Here the vertex lies on first quadrant, and so B must be greater than 0. Okay, because when A is negative, that means if we choose A is equals to minus 1, then this minus and the value of A, that is minus 1, will make it positive, and this vertex A lies on first quadrant, we know when a point lies on first quadrant, its sign becomes plus plus. That is why the sign of B will be positive, because this minus and A has a negative value, and that negative value when multiplied with this minus will become positive. That is why to remain this vertex in the first quadrant, B must be positive. That is why B greater than 0. Now, if we put x equals to 0 in y equals to f of x equals to ax square plus bx plus c, we get y equals to f of 0 equals to a into 0 square plus b into 0 plus c. So this implies y equals to f of 0 equals to c. So c represents this length, because this is the point where this parabola intersects y axis. Point of intersection with y axis. So this length will represent c, and we know ordinate of a point is positive above x axis. So this implies c is greater than 0. Okay. So thus for this parabola, therefore the for this downward parabola, we have a less than 0, b greater than 0, and c is also greater than 0. Okay. Thus we can identify the signs of a, b and c. Okay. Now if we follow this problem too, then this graph is also a parabola, and here this parabola is a upward parabola. That is why we can say a is positive. Here the parabola is an upward parabola. So a must be greater than 0. Okay. Already we know when the parabola is opened at positive y axis, then a must be greater than 0. Now this vertex A lies in fourth quadrant. So in the fourth quadrant, sign convention is plus minus. So this thing, that is minus b by a, b minus b by 2a, must be greater than 0. So since the vertex minus b by 2a comma minus d by 4a, since the vertex a this, so lies in fourth quadrant, therefore minus b by 2a must be greater than 0. Since a is greater than 0, therefore we can say b must be lesser than 0. Okay. This vertex minus b by 2a comma minus capital D by 4a lies on fourth quadrant, and we know in the fourth quadrant sign convention is plus minus. That is why this thing, that is minus b by 2a, must be greater than 0. And here by this graph already we know a is greater than 0. So to become minus b by 2a greater than 0, it must be b must be lesser than 0. Okay. Similarly, this graph similarly as problem 1, this graph intersects y-axis at this point of intersection with y-axis. So, if we put x equals to 0 in y equals to f of x equals to ax square plus bx plus c, then we have y equals to f of 0 equals to a into 0 square plus b into 0 plus c, imply y equals to f of 0 equals to c. So this represents c. Okay. So since ordinate is negative below x-axis, so c must be lesser than 0. Therefore, c must be less than 0, as it lies below x-axis. Okay. So therefore, for this upward parabola, a is greater than 0, b is less than 0, and c is also less than 0. Okay. So this is the way by which we can find the sign of a, b and c. Now in problem 3, we observe that this parabola intersects, this parabola touches x-axis. Okay. So what is the speciality of touching? Since the parabola touches x-axis, therefore the ordinate of the vertex capital A minus b by 2a comma minus d by 4a must be 0. So this imply minus b by 4a is equals to 0. This imply d equals to 0. Since a not equals to 0, since this represents a quadratic polynomial, that is why a always get not equals to 0. Okay. So that by this from this relation we get capital D is equals to 0. Again D means b square minus 4ac. So that is why we can say b square minus 4ac is equals to 0. So when a quadratic polynomial or any kind of polynomial of mode degree means its degree may be more, maybe 2 or 3. That means not a linear polynomial. Okay. So when a polynomial is a mode degree polynomial like second degree polynomial, third degree polynomial, fourth degree polynomial, etc., when that polynomial touches x-axis, then its zeros or roots becomes equal. Okay. So this is the condition by which we can say the zeros of this polynomial equals to 0, as for b square minus 4ac equals to 0, there will be equal values of x. So now this polynomial represents an upward parabola. So therefore a is greater than 0. Okay. The vertex A lies on positive x-axis, so minus b by 2a must be greater than 0. Okay. So here a greater than 0 and this vertex minus b by 2a comma minus b by minus capital D by 4a lies on positive x-axis. So this thing, that is minus b by 2a, must be greater than 0. So these imply b must be lesser than 0 because a is positive, and to make this whole thing positive, b must be negative because this whole thing is greater than 0. Okay. So we can say b is lesser than 0. Similarly, as the previous two problems, if we put x equals to 0, then we have y equals to f of 0 equals to a into 0 square plus b into 0 plus c. This will give y equals to f of 0 equals to c. Okay. So this is the point of intersection. Point of intersection with y-axis. So this value represents c, and this is the ordinate. So this ordinate lies above x-axis. So c is greater than 0. Imply c must be greater than 0. So for this upward parabola, a is greater than 0, b is less than 0, and c is also greater than 0. Okay. So this is the three graphs. With the help of these graphs, how we can find the signs of a, b, c, already we learned. Okay. So our class is completed. So this is the way by which we can find the value signs of ABC. Okay.